I'm really keen to get your take on leadership because across 17 years in the NRL,
Yeah.
you were a great leader at the Bulldogs and the Warriors. You helped them rebuild, but I'm sure you also witnessed and experienced some really weak leaders or bad leaders. What is it that makes a good leader, and what was your style of leadership?
That's a good question. I always was a leader when I was in the juniors, and then when I got to the Bulldogs, it was almost like the King of England. Like, you've got to wait your chance, and you mightn't get it because
Captain in waiting or whatever it was.
Terry Lamb was
Yeah.
captain for so long, and then we had Simon Gillies, and then Darren Britt, and then Darren decided to go to England, and which gave me the chance. I really wanted it, but the big thing that Steve Folkes had an issue with was my inconsistency. I wasn't consistent. He said, I can't have a captain who's not consistent. So that'll answer probably your first question, is you've got to be consistent. You cannot lead if you aren't performing. So his biggest question mark over me was that. So I had to try and find a way to show him consistency. I was always a good trainer. I loved trying to lead and push myself and that type of thing. So I just continually start to do stuff like that. When I got the situation where I might have been a chance, I went and saw our sports psychologist at the time, and he just says, right, well, what do you think it's going to take to be the captain of the Bulldogs? And so I just blah, 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 blah. And then he just said, you got all the answers, mate. I don't know why you're here. So that gave me a bit of confidence. I had to deal a fair bit. So first game I was captain of the Dogs, we lost to the West Tigers, who we should have won easily. First game of the year. And then the second game we drew against the Broncos. So after 2 games, we're one of the favourites. My captainship, and we haven't won a game yet, So there's starting to get some question marks asked. And then we went on this 17-game winning streak. And it was a time where I'm not being arrogant or up ourselves, but I never felt we were going to get beaten, no matter what situation we were in. That's just how we were playing. And the Warriors were the one who beat us over here in Mount Smart. And they did a bit of a job on us, actually. So we were on a real, we were steamrolling it. And, then we come up against the Warriors and they taught us a lesson. Then the salary cap thing come out a week or so later, and we're out of the comp in regards to being able to win the comp.
What did that teach you about leadership?
Yeah, honest, just being honest. So I was sort of thrown in front of the cameras to be the representative because Mace and a few others started having their opinions, which
Mace being Willie Mason.
Willie Mace,
who's
yeah,
not short of them.
Well, speaks and then thinks, And at the time, we needed to be really consistent and very respectful. We had a real chance to, I thought, to really make a real progressive march in a way that would never have been imaginable. So, put our hands up. We've made a mistake. We're committed to continue to play in this competition to the rules that we've been given. We weren't going to play in the semis. Sweet as, Dave. That's fine. David Gallup, who I spoke to a bit. We played Canberra after we got told the decision, which was devastating. We got 39 points taken off us. So you take 39 points off a team, they're going to be a negative most of the time. Well, that's how good we were going. We played Canberra. First 20 minutes, we were down 20-0. Come back and I think we lost 32-28. The next week we played Melbourne and absolutely give it to them. And then we played our last game at home against Brisbane, who, if they won that game, become minor premiers. We won, and I told Wayne, I said, we're going to win tonight. And he goes, no, you're not. And I said, we are. The crowd ran onto the field. We got cheered around on their shoulders. It was as though we won the comp. It was one of the most emotional nights I've been a part of. Of a club like the Bulldogs, we were running really high. Everything was going good. Pre-season 2004, there was, from Coffs Harbour, there was sexual assault allegations made against members of the team. And again, we felt the best way to approach it was to have minimal voices, be very consistent. So again, it was mainly me, not really the CEO or the coach. It was predominantly me. So again, very different situations. So we're dealing now with sexual assault accusation. I've got 2 girls. I've got a son, I've got a wife. I was on the trip. So to come home first and foremost, that were you one of them? There's a question that's asked. And then, not being able to go to schools, which we did a lot of school visits because of the height of, and totally got it right. So what we decided to do was all sort of be a part of the process investigation to try and get it done as quick as we could, because we believed that there was nothing to be. So we all got DNA tested and interviewed at the police, and quite intimidating. Never been in that situation before. This thing went on for 6 months. So we're the front 3 pages, the back 3 pages of all the papers. And there was a task force put in place. It was huge. So eventually it came out that there wasn't enough evidence. This was a thing that is sort of really hard to cop, because it wasn't finalised in regard to saying, no, they're not guilty. It was almost insinuating, we believe they're guilty. We just didn't have enough evidence to prove it.
Yeah.
And so every time there's anything to do with a sexual assault accusation, or the Bulldogs 2004 get brought up every single time. So that was quite daunting as a person to have to speak to the public about something that, is massive. Like, I know having girls, like if it was my daughters, man, I'd want to find out what was going on, So that taught me a lot again. And then I signed with the Warriors, and I come to the Warriors, and I didn't come to the club expecting to be the leader. I just thought Rubes was going to be the man, and that was cool, and I was okay with that. And then when I got asked to be the captain, I was, wow, really, me? And I thought, okay, well, I've experienced salary cap, I've experienced sexual assault accusations, been a captain for 3 years on the field. I can handle this. And, yeah, not even a clue to what I was getting into at the Warriors. Very completely different dynamic, very different individuals, very different club, very different environment. And I actually learnt so much about leadership. Under Ivan and the players that I played with, they weren't sub-leaders because they were huge leaders in their own right. They just didn't have a C on game day beside their name, and really learnt to not to rely, but to communicate with everyone, because to be able to have 30 plus players and have a coverage of 30 plus players, making sure that everyone's okay, you can't do it yourself. And we had a high number of Aussies in the team, so there was about 11 in the squad. So they'd probably predominantly talk to me. Some of them wouldn't, because we didn't have that personality. That's cool. But then the Māori, Tongan, Samoan, they'd be talking to Rubes or Stace, or, do you know what I mean? And if one of the boys wasn't quite right, instead of me going and ripping into him and say, what's going on? You're training like a busted. Rubes or someone might come to me and say, Sonny, this week's there's some stuff going on. He'll be right by the weekend. It's all good. Sweet. Learnt so much, mate. So to answer your question, it's been a long answer, but I totally think there's no hard and fast one way to be a leader. I think it depends on where you are, what you're doing, who you're with, who you are. I think the best thing that you can do is be very genuine and authentic as an individual, because as soon as you try and be someone else, people see through it. So I couldn't be Darren Britt or Simon Gillies or Terry Lamb, 'cause I wasn't those people. I had to be Steve Price, and that was probably one of the biggest things I learnt when I come to the Warriors. I made some decisions early in games because I come with a knee injury. So my first game for the club was against Manly, first game of the year. And we got a penalty, and I went to take the 2, and all the boys are blowing up wanting to tap.
Yeah, tap and go, yeah.
Because that's what they did.
Yeah, it wasn't.
And I almost said, boys, I watched you last year, and the tap and go didn't work.
Yeah.
We're taking the 2. Right? And we ended up losing by 2 points in that game. But I think it was really good for me to understand what I was getting into, because I didn't have that experience on the field with them leading into that game. And then as we went along, I was learning about them and each individual, and they were learning about me. And at the Bulldogs, I'd been at the club for 10 years. And all those boys that I was in the team with, I saw come through as kids. So I knew how they ticked, everything about them. Braithen Astor, if he wasn't having a good day, you wouldn't have a go at him, because he just that was his way. He'd react back to you, and that wasn't good. Whereas Brent Sherwin, if you put a rocket up him, he'd almost reset and he'd be right.
Yeah.
And so those different personalities, it's know how they tick. And, you know, at the Warriors, it might have been Rubes just having a yarn to Benny Matz or someone like that, that would work. So, yeah, it's really interesting, that dynamic. It can be very, very different depending on where you are.
One of the biggest challenges you faced in your leadership at the Warriors was Sonny Fai.
Yep.
Looking back now, I mean, dealing with loss of a teammate and the trauma that you're going through, you probably didn't really appreciate it at the time. But reflecting back, like, would you do things differently across that year?
Yeah, I reckon we would have, whether it was as a group or individually, we would have done a lot more work on each individual to deal with it. Because we're rugby league players, but we're human beings, and I think we just thought, we're going to go and do this for Sonny, and we had his number and his signature on our jersey for the year, and we were playing for Sonny, and we didn't make the finals that year. And so I was really embarrassed about that, because that didn't represent what Sonny meant to us at all. So either you don't say something like that, or we need to go about it very differently. And it probably really hit home to me when I watched Manu on 60 Minutes at the end of that season. And he was his usual self, the gold teeth, laughing and giggling and all that. And then at the end, the lady sort of said, so what impact has the loss of Sonny Fai had on you? And he just lost it. He completely changed. He was crying, and there's snot coming out of his nose, and you could just, and I was doing it too. And I know that there would have been 20 or 25 or 30 other guys who are in the squad doing exactly the same. And I go, wow, like, this should have happened back in January. You know, like, it's not dealing with it. It's just almost putting Sonny at rest and being able to go, you know, we're going to do so much, and we're going to do it for us in representative of you, more so than we're doing this for you, and didn't fire a shot, really. So
I do recall you, I think it was at a stand-up out at Bethel's.
I think it was at Mount Smart.
Was it? When you know exactly where I'm going with this. You and that endeared you to me.
Yeah.
Again, as someone that you look up to. Who
Well,
wasn't.
I was embarrassed.
Were you?
At the time, I was really embarrassed, because I try and be a strong, a strong individual, particularly for my teammates, and particularly during that time, I thought we needed to have that real strength. But when I look back on it, we probably needed more of probably what happened.
Yeah.
So yeah, the reporter asked me very much the same question, and it was almost straight after it had sort of happened, and yeah, so I'm trying to be as normal as I can be, and then I just lost it. I was blubbering and could hardly talk, and yeah, so I don't know. There's no perfect way to deal with things, as we were talking about before, but mate, he was such a beautiful, beautiful soul. So ahead of his time. He packed so much into nearly 21 years of his life, and impacted on so many people, and would have been a huge star in our game with his athletic ability. And I'd spent a lot of time with Sonny, because, you know, he was someone that sort of really looked up to us, like me and Rubes, and I loved doing stuff with him, because he took it on board straight away. You know, defensively he was a big beast, and I just said, if you get yourself a little bit lower and you don't even have to try hard, you're going to empty blokes out. And we started working on that, and he did actually start to. And he goes, this is so easy, bro, you know. But I'd always rip into him at training, like he was really strong in the gym, and he'd do like 200 kilo bench presses. And I said, mate, you got to stop doing these Tyrannosaurus Rex bench presses. Like, it's touch titties and then go full lengths, not these little Tyrannosauruses. And I say, right, let's stop doing that. Let's do full length ones. And he couldn't hardly do two then, right? And I go, now let's take some of these off and let's get your real bench press weight, right? Same with chin-ups. Like, you'd be doing these little halfies, and I said, you got to completely release bars and then go, and little things like that. But my favourite thing about Sonny was I'd come to training early, and all I'd hear is laughing out of the team room. And what he would do, he'd come to training early because he didn't have Wi-Fi at home, or internet at home. So he'd come to train and say he could watch all the YouTube stuff.
Yeah.
And he would just be sitting in there. He'd be there 2 hours before training, sitting in there watching YouTube stuff, cracking himself up. But this is a diversity of his impact. Was there'd be a 5-year-old to a 95-year-old grandma who would absolutely love him in the same way. That was his impact.
Was there a good yarn about him winning a Warriors karaoke competition?
Yeah, so I used to have a night at the start of the year before the first game. So invite all the players, the staff, and their partners or wives. And I'd always have a theme, so it'd be, say, P. So you'd have to dress up something P, pirate, policeman, whatever.
I'm glad you clarified that. That could have got us in a lot of hot water for methamphetamine use. So it's good that we got there.
None of that. So then we do that, and then I thought, what else can we do? But with the boys, and you probably know better than anyone, you got to have prizes, otherwise they won't.
Yeah.
So I saw Mr. Apati. He gave me some longboard skateboards, which the boys thought were pretty cool. So best female, best male dress, they won that, right? And then I thought, let's have a karaoke machine just to add a little bit. So I did that, and I thought, if we have that, no one's going to get up and use it. It's going to be a waste. So we'll have a prize for that. So we had an iPad Nano, which back then, whew. So anyway, I let the team know, boys, we're having the night on Saturday night, iPad Nano, karaoke, best singer, longboard, skateboards for best dressed, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, Sonny pulls me aside and he goes, bro, I really want that iPad Nano. And I said, all you got to do is sing, mate. You sing and you're the best, you get your iPad Nano. Bro, I'm not real good at singing though. I said, well, you're going to have to do something, mate. Anyway, on the night, Rubes was absolutely slaying it. He's sung about 10 songs. It's all over, right? Next thing, the music starts and it's Banger Boys, Banger Bus or whatever it's called.
The Banger Bus is coming.
Yeah.
So you got the one. You got the one, Steve.
So anyway, Sonny comes out and we're going, oh, here we go. What's going to happen here? And he starts to sort of not sing because he was miming and it wasn't good. He wasn't even in time. And then all of a sudden, it got to the beaty bit, and then he started just doing his chest and wiggling his hips a little bit, and then started undoing a button. And mate, all the wives are just starting to lose it. I'm going, oh, here we go.
He was chiseled, eh?
Yeah,
Absolutely
he was
chiseled.
a beast, man.
Yeah.
He was a beast. So then he started undoing the shirt, and then he gets his shirt off, and he flicks it. I think Grant Ravelli's missus copped that one on the face, and she's like nearly melted on the spot. And then he ended up getting down, I think, to his Speedos by the end of the song. And, yeah, it was done, mate.
Yeah.
Rube, sorry, cuz.
Yeah.
Sonny's got it. And, yeah, it was, oh, mate, it was awesome.